Hi there, this is Solitary Ronin from Solitary Ronin Films, and welcome to another random review. Today's random review is Bob Clark's Dead of Night, or DEATHDREAM, from 1974. This is part of 101 Films' Black Label new release number 29, which is Bob Clark horror collection. Bob Clark's kind of interesting director that's kind of forgotten about for various reasons. He made 3 really interesting horror films, but he also made Porky's 1 and 2. He also made Baby Geniuses 1 and 2. He made A Christmas Story. He made Rhinestone, the Sly Stallone, Dolly Parton mashup. He made Karate Dog. But he also made the 3 horror films that I'll briefly mention, the other 2 that are more famous than DEATHDREAM, or Dead of Night. You can see this is another really nice box from 101. It's actually got artwork in the inside as well. This is number 29 in the Black Label series. I was complete at some point, but I have actually sold 2 or 3 of them, so I'm not complete anymore with the 101 Black Label. 2 of these films, well, one of them is really famous, and that's Black Christmas, which 101 had released in a standalone edition in their red boxes. So Black Christmas is kind of one of the first slashers. This is 1974, so it's actually before Halloween. You also get a poster, and you get lovely disturbing art cards, and you get a nice little booklet as well. So everybody has heard of Black Christmas or has seen Black Christmas. Lovely. And the other film I had heard of, but I'd never actually seen, and that's Children Shouldn't Play with Dead Things, which is a really fun film about a theatre group led by their maniacal, despotic leader who wants to go to this island graveyard and resurrect a corpse in a satanic ritual. And he is a fairly annoying lead character that you just want him to get his just desserts. And he digs up a corpse and scares his colleagues. But one of his other colleagues does a proper ritual, and they end up bringing to life most of the other corpses in the vicinity. It will remind you of Zombie Flesh Eaters, but again, this one was 7 years before Zombie Flesh Eaters. There's a lot of Zombie Flesh Eaters in Children Shouldn't Play with Dead Things. It is a slow burn. It takes its time to actually get to the zombie stuff, but it is really enjoyable. So those 2 films, Black Christmas and Children Shouldn't Play with Dead Things, came before more famous iterations of this kind of stories. But Dead of Night is my favourite out of the 3. It's the one I'd never heard of, or DEATHDREAM. Tom Savini did the makeup, And I think what elevates it is kind of the political aspect, as far as it's 1974. It's about a family who hears that their son has been killed in Vietnam. We see the death, or the apparent death, of the soldier in Vietnam. They're given that telegram to tell them that their son has been killed, and then later that evening he turns up on the front doorstep. We see him hitchhiking, and then he turns up in the shadowy porch at night, and of course the family's ecstatic. The father, played by John Marley, who again is one of those, you won't recognise the name but you'll recognise the face. He was the film producer in The Godfather who got the horse's head in his bed. He was one of John Cassavetes' collaborators. He appeared in a fair number of Cassavetes films. And he really gives it gravitas as the father. The mother, you get the feeling, has more of an interest in the son than the daughter, as far as she's defending him. So he comes back, he's very morose, his behaviour is fairly odd. There's a wonderful scene where he makes a joke about being dead that takes a little while to land, and then when it lands everybody ends up laughing maniacally, a little bit too maniacally. And a truck driver has been found murdered rather nastily, and witnesses say that he picked up a hitchhiker and that hitchhiker was a soldier. The father becomes more suspicious about his behaviour, especially involving the family dog. The mother becomes more and more maniacal in her defence of her son. The father becomes more and more suspicious, shares his suspicions with the doctor, and things kind of go where you think they would go. But there's some interesting elements. Obviously, again, it's about PTSD. I think there is a stat that more US soldiers that came back from Vietnam died after the war due to suicide and drug addiction and other things like that, rather than were actually killed in the war. So it has that kind of element to it. There's also a kind of Romero's Martin, which obviously recently got a 4K release finally. Not in the kind of film it is, but just in that, the grittiness of it. And even though it's low budget, there's a couple of really effective scenes, and there is a mix of two kind of horror monster genres going on. It's really well acted for a low budget film. Again, this was 2 years before Martin. It does have that gritty look, but out of the three films, for me, Black Christmas is actually the weakest out of the three films, even though that's the most famous out of the three films. But Dead of Night, or DEATHDREAM, is really effective. The scene where the family actually gets the telegram is actually quite moving. And the mother defending the son, and the father's kind of difficulty in accepting the truth are all performed very well, probably a lot higher than you would expect in a really low budget horror film. It is interesting that Clark didn't really stay in this vein. He, as I say, kind of bounced about to Baby Genius films and Porky's. It would have been interesting if he'd stayed in the horror vein, but as we know, a lot of filmmakers kind of start their career doing horror films as a way in, because everybody knows there's an audience there, and then they kind of go in different directions. Not all horror filmmakers in the early days stay in the horror genre. But this was a really wonderful surprise. The extras in the set are wonderful. They've all got commentaries. And this one has Dreaming of Death, which is a feature-length documentary on these 3 films by Bob Clark, which is absolutely wonderful. In the set, it's a really nice box set, and I think well worth picking up if you like low budget horror. That certainly 2 of them I would say are fairly influential for what would come later, but DEATHDREAM, as I say, was an absolute gem, just about, you know, the topic and coming back from Vietnam, and it does have an interesting kind of mashup of the classic or 2 of the classic monsters. I won't say which 2 classic monsters, but you can probably guess which 2 classic monsters, as the body count rises. So that's a random review of DEATHDREAM or Dead of Night. They've all got alternate artwork. I'm not going to show you the alternate artwork for this one, because it might give a little bit too much away. But if you're a fan of 70s influential horror, the Bob Clark collection by 101 Black Label is a really lovely set, and it's not actually that expensive. I'm sure if Arrow did it, it would be twice the price. So let me know. It's got a lovely back cover as well. Let me know in the comments below if you've seen DEATHDREAM, or which film do you prefer out of DEATHDREAM, Black Christmas and Children Shouldn't Play with Dead Things. And thank you very much for watching. This is Solitary Ronin from Solitary Ronin Films, saying farewell.